through the Orthodox Christian Network and the Greek Orthodox Church of St. George in Bethesda, Maryland. I'm Michael Haldis, and just as a reminder, our theme this year has been the mystery of salvation. And last week, we began a very interesting discussion by request to talk about the meaning of life. And I decided to do it because it's very germane to salvation. That's what our life's about. I mean, moving towards salvation, or it should be about. And so last week, we had a lot of people in the room, and we had a very interactive, good discussion covering many different facets. We talked about, why did God create us? Why are we here? What are we supposed to be doing? What's the purpose of our lives individually, community? How do we make a difference? Should that even be what we're striving for? So I just wanted to continue along that discussion, and I thought, at a high level, I thought we would kind of explore today the opposite, like loss of meaning, and then freedom and thankfulness. We'll see where we go. One thing I do want to say, though, is want to remind, connecting the threads, just reminding us about what this has to do with salvation in this sense, going back to where we started this year, having a lot of classes derivative of the parables involving seeds. And remember, I keep coming back to this. Remember the parable of the sower, and how the seed, 3/4 of the seed, fell into conditions that didn't really allow the seed by choice or by circumstance to flourish. But then the seed that did flourish, they flourished at different rates, 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold. And so the connection is that our ability to understand and live the purpose of our lives as God intends directly correlates to theosis, our growth in the Lord, and whether we're going to yield a crop of 30-fold, 60-fold, or 100-fold. And we'll get into it maybe today, we'll see. But a lot of it has to do with our understanding of choices and things like that. So let me just start off, and I'd like to read a quote and then move right in. So this is about the meaning of life. This is from Dr. Timothy Batitsis in his book, The Ethics of Beauty. He said, it's like the question, what is the meaning of life? Well, what was the meaning of the last book you read? The book had meaning. It's because the contents pointed to something bigger than and beyond that book. And because this something bigger was also present in some form within the book. The meaning of life should be answered with a simple simplicity. If this life has meaning, then this life must share in something beyond this life that is also present within this life. For us, that something is someone, Christ, the incarnate Son of God, crucified and resurrected. Christ is the very being of beings. He is within this world through this incarnation, and yet he is the God beyond all being. He is beyond this world. So I chose that quote just to point to both the immanent and the transcendent aspects of our lives, and then we're gonna get down to what I think you all refer to as the practical level. But just remember the touch points of how everything we do results in what's immanent and also what's transcendent. So having said that high, lofty comment, let's talk about loss of meaning. Have you ever felt or ever encountered anyone that you feel or struggled yourself with loss of meaning in your life, or loss in meaning at times and things in your life, or things that are causing you to question meaning, things like that? Let's just open up a discussion. Anybody wants to volunteer? I think the answer is probably yes for all of us at some point, but.
You're saying, have we encountered anyone who seems lost? Like, we have encountered many people who just seem utterly aimless in their lives. I mean, just going through motions.
Yeah, let's explore that a little bit. So, and why is that? I mean, any insights into why those people were like that, or?
So let me offer this, if I might. First of all, without sounding self-righteous, I think sort of one of the apparent answers to me is,
hi, Marcia,
they seem to be completely unmoored.
What?
Unmoored. From God.
Yeah.
Or the presence of God, or the thought of God. Not that they're deliberate atheists, right? Where they're openly hostile to God, but there's no presence of God in their lives that they sense. So, if that's the case, without getting too stark about this, then someone really is a bag of chemicals and water, right? Without God. So, purely materialistic, no sense of higher purpose. Go for the sake of going.
Get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when you said that, it just came to mind when Christ said, "Let the dead bury their own dead." Remember? Do you remember that scene?
I remember the line.
And it's in the gospel where Christ was talking about people to come follow him.
Mm-hmm.
And this was, I forget which, it might have been in all three synoptic gospels,
Mm-hmm.
but it's brief, but it's really the purpose of the gospel then to show us all the different excuses we make not to be more than God. So one of them was, he said, follow me. And one offered excuse, well, I have to go bury my father first.
Mm.
And he said something kind of shocking, let the dead bury their own dead, which, in our modern context, if someone said that, if I said, I got to go bury my dad, and someone said that to me, I think it was rude and insensitive. But the point being is, to your point, is
Higher purpose.
The Walking Dead. We believe that somebody can be, physically breathing, talking, walking, but they're spiritually dead because, they're unmoored.
But I guess, Michael, I would also add, and I don't want to absolve anyone of agency, but look, I just see what happens in my own neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
I live in Northern Virginia. A lot of parents are specifically not raising their children to have any sense of faith. The children are the product of parenting.
Mm-hmm.
If the parents never inculcate the concept of, and I'm just saying God, I'm not even talking about Orthodox.
Right, I understand. Right.
So the divine mover, providence, whatever one wants to call God in the abstract. These children are growing up godless. And I'm seeing this now with young children, but I presume that when we talk about some of these larger statistics, like you see this whole young generation, the nuns, so to speak, NONES. And a lot of them don't seem to have any sense of why they're alive, nor do they seem to care. Again, I don't want to sound self-righteous here, but
it doesn't sound at all self-righteous to me.
A lot of this begins with the desire to try to understand why we're here, right? Like, we're not here as accidents of the universe, right? So if we're not here as accidents of the universe, we're here for a reason. But you start to go down that pathway if you even begin with that thought process. But if it never occurs to you to wonder, why are we here? What we're doing here? Is there a purpose to life? And that's what I fear sometimes when I just see large numbers of young people who've never had this sort of spark ever implanted in them. So I'm not absolving them. When you're an adult, you learn about these things, but we're not planting the seeds, to your point, in a lot of the younger people, at least in American society.
Yeah.
That's the only one that I can talk about.
No, and you use the word agency, and it's interesting because I have in my notes, and we'll see how we go with this whole notion of freedom of choice and, our agency, right? Yeah. But you also hit on something. You didn't use the word, but I think you're hitting on something that's a real problem for any of us. And it has to do with culture, because we express and absorb the culture. We absorb and express the culture around us. And one of the things, and I'll throw this out for discussion, one of the things, we live in what we believe to be a culture of choice, right? Where God is a choice among many. God or not God. And we kind of touched on it last time. We touched on the whole culture, the young people. And I've seen this on these TikToks and these Instagram reels. There's this recurring theme out there, and maybe it's just where I'm attuned to, that be true to yourself. So, this is this culture where you choose self over anything else. So I think it's difficult. And I think I've heard adults say that they want their kids to have faith, but it's their choice. I'll let them have a choice. And I'm like,
that's like saying, it's okay if my children don't grow up learning. If somebody has something you want it, take it. Who's culpable?
Or come to the dinner table.
Who's culpable?
Okay, I'm not going to tell you what to eat. It's your choice. You decide. Oh, I'm going to have M&Ms. I mean, it's
The phrase that comes to mind that I hear most often on my trips to New York from among the friends of and people just casually meet. I'm spiritual, but I don't have a faith. I don't have a religion. I don't believe in organized religion. Everything has an organization. When you get up in the morning and brush your teeth, put your clothes on, you're organizing.
Well,
lots of ways.
you could extrapolate that out to even science and organization of the universe. There seems to be a hierarchy of order and things. Yeah, I know, but it's interesting because I think not absolved of agency, but now there's so much of this belief in choice, if you will, or we can choose. I'm not so sure that's true. We can maybe we'll talk about it now.
I have a situation too.
Go ahead.
I have I know of 3 families that started out in the Orthodox faith.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened is they got married, supposedly. And all of a sudden, they dropped their faith. And I wonder why.
Are these Orthodox people that married each other, or are the Orthodox marrying someone else?
They married outside
of Christian faith altogether, or just outside of the Orthodox faith? Or
well, that we don't know.
Oh, we don't know. Okay.
One was Jewish, so we know that.
Right.
The other 2, one was Catholic.
Okay.
And we think that she dominated the family, and because of that, the husband changed. He hasn't changed yet, but we believe that he's going to. And then the third one was a disaster because he doesn't have any faith at all.
Okay.
And I just wonder whatever happened. What could we do, if anything, to give them faith?
That's a tall order.
That is a tall order.
Difficult.
Yes.
Inspiration usually works, or it makes you feel better at any rate.
Usually, yeah. I don't know. I do. God's never. I think we can safely say God's never content to leave us in a state that's not good for us, and this is why. And it ties into a lack of meaning. When things are bad that happen to us, it's not that God is the author of that, but that he's then working within that to bring us back to where we should. But not everybody responds. And it ties into here. So this whole thing about loss of meaning, we've danced around something, but I want to tie it back. This is actually, it's a long quote. I don't know if I'll read the whole thing, but I'll read parts of it. This is from Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew. He said, "The human soul feels deeply the need to be loved. The widespread sense that life has no meaning is to be blamed on the absence of love." I see Ellen nodding her head. So I thought about that because it's part of a longer quote. But that part of the quote, I thought, well, then it made me think. Okay, let's think. The conversation I was having with myself. Let me again remind myself what love is. Right? It's not always an emotion or a feeling. It's a way of being. It's an action. It's an act of will about the concern of the people around you, and even at cost to yourself. So, if you're not surrounded by people like that, or you don't understand that and cultivate that, and that's missing from your life, then where are you then trying to find meaning? Right? Like, in other words, you don't start derivatively. We're in this room as Christians, so I can presume we're all struggling to the best of our ability to draw closer to Christ and to follow his command, which are to love him and love others, right? We fail at it at times and whatnot, but that's still, and I could probably make a case that most of us in here are, again, we'll be doing it imperfectly, but our roles in our family, our roles in our jobs, all the different roles, there's probably some sense we have of the cohesion of those all together that are all us at work to grow closer to Christ in these different things. Is that a fair comment that we? Mm-hmm. But think about that. Because you understand what Christ means by love and how he loved us, as shown in the Gospels. But if you're missing that type of understanding of love and that love, so then where does it lead you to find meaning? So it's an open question. I mean, Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew lays it out a little bit more, but I ask you, where because he then builds a case, okay, where people mostly find their meaning. Everybody want to take a stab? Go ahead, Ellen.
I think that people do. I think that people's actions and their actions are dictated by either the need to feel loved, the need to feel connected, or the need to feel safe.
Mm.
And I feel like that connection, you can say there's also, love isn't always like nice, love isn't always whatever. I think there has to be an authenticity and truth to that love that is deeper, that draws you in and provides connection, even if it's, I think that a lot of people are so desperate for a connection that they end up just following, like, nothing. I don't know her personally, but like the whole Kim Kardashian, like, we're leaving our kids to just follow these people who offer a very like junk food connection. Like, look at me, whatever, and I could buy, and they're leading them this way. Whereas the people that you love the deepest, or in our minds, like if you ask who do I love the most, they aren't necessarily pretty. They're not, those things, but it is a deep connected. It is an authenticity and truth to that love. And if they don't see it around them, then they don't feel safe in approaching it. Then Yeah,
you actually. I think what you're saying ties into what his next sentence was in this quote, where he says, "Our fellow human beings are, for the most part, trapped within their individual pursuits and seek to fill the emptiness caused by the lack of love with the acquisition of material goods, carnal pleasures, and fame." I mean, how many those young people in your neighborhood you referenced, or just, when I talk to young people, we all know young people, we have young people. I'm sure you encounter, if you talk to them sometimes about what they want out of life and ambition, it probably falls into some of this sometimes. Fame, fortune, things, achievement of something, but which is, again, not all of it's bad, but is it derivative of something higher, or is it just for the sake of?
Well, it's like you said, it's the culture.
Yeah.
That was steeped in.
It starts at the top. Starts at the top.
At the top, please.
The voice you hear the loudest. We're making money, making deals. We're getting on. We're getting power.
Phone's always with us.
I would say, I think I know what you're referring to, but I think that's a reflection of where people are more so, because it starts in the home, more so than, these things.
It starts in the home, but if you're constantly looking at your phone more than you're talking to your parents.
Oh, right. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
It's just constant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the phone's just another manifestation of
we had this problem before smartphones.
Yeah.
I remember before 2008.
Yeah, I guess people.
This worsens it.
It's way worse.
This has taken all the bad parts of us and magnified them. Yeah. It's magnified them. Yeah.
I think going back to your original statement, or the quote by the patriarch, I think in some ways, I think people can feel genuinely loved without faith. I think I don't want to get into too many subcategories, but the people that are actively hostile towards God, something is missing in their lives.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's an absence of love, right? Like, why? Because it's almost like they're rebelling against something that they know is pulling them, and they're fighting it. But that kind of animosity to God, to faith, to people of faith and whatnot, I think some absence of love, and again, this is sort of pop psychology here, but I think a lot of people who are faithless or haven't been blessed with faith can still feel genuine love.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know that I would have such a cut and dry dichotomy.
Yeah, I get it.
Again, it goes back to what we were saying before about a bag of chemicals. If I believe that love is simply a neurotransmitter reaction in my brain, and it's nothing else, right? It's just electricity in my brain. I don't know. Am I feeling loved? Am I being hostile to God if I'm reducing myself to simply my component parts? And does that play into it? You're driving here, that all of this is for a higher purpose. We're not a bag of chemicals. And
of course not. We're not.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not what
who are the people that are feeling loved or not loved, and where do they fit into this broad spectrum? So I think it's not just two categories.
Oh no, I don't. Yeah, I didn't mean. If I took it that direct,
I'm saying, and I'm not faulting the patriarch. I'm just saying, I agree with the foundational argument there, but this really is so complex.
Oh, it's a very complex, because I would say, from a ontological perspective, we're created in God's image and likeness. Therefore, we are wired and built for this love, this not, the definition of love as we understand it. And people are quite, because of how they're quite capable of some degree of that without the conscious acknowledgement or seeking, because that's how we're built. But I would say to you that whatever someone's capacity is without faith in God, it'd be infinitely greater. So there's, so yes, it's very gray. There's, people are at different parts of this the spectrum, if you will. Yeah, absolutely. But I think that, I think what I'm, ultimately, I think what he's hitting on is whether it's the absence of love or the absence of a true understanding, the absence of then putting that understanding into practice, all of that to varying degrees is the cause of a lot of the stuff we have today. I think that's what he's getting at. But and I think loss of meaning, to me, it's both loss of meaning and where we place meaning is very important for us to evaluate for ourselves, but also for those around us, because I think that this very question is going to determine. Remember, Father Peter, your salvation is at risk, right? Everything we do determines where we move on that continuum towards Christ, away from Christ, not as far as we should go. So I think that's why it's worth exploring all these different aspects and facets of this question, in my view.
If I can bring up a side anecdote
Please.
to all this, and I don't mean to be pounding away at atheists.
Let's talk about him.
But one of the most famous ones of the last 20 years is Richard Dawkins, right? So he wrote that book, The God Delusion.
Yeah.
And back when hostile.
Yeah.
Like, actually, hostility to God atheism was all the rage, right? 15 years
Yeah, him.
ago.
There was a couple of them. Yeah.
And he was recently quoted as saying that he remains an atheist, but he prefers to live in a Christian society. It's like fundamentally he knows that there's a higher good there that's reflected in the Christian culture, even though he insists on being an atheist.
So, Richard, not that you'll ever be listening, you don't even know who I am, but you're full of baloney. And you know it, we know it, and your fellow atheists know it because they denounced you as not intellectually honest.
Oh, is that?
Oh, yeah. These pop atheists like Richard Dawkins, Hitchens to an extent, Sam Harris, intellectually honest atheists who are dedicated to the truth as they know it. And I wish I could quote them because I know I read this. They denounced him and said, Richard Dawkins, this kind of not because he said that, because he was picking and choosing, trying to just build a following. He wasn't intellectually honest even about his own atheism. That's why. Because if you ever encountered an intellectually honest atheist, it's both scary and I don't know, I'm gonna call it not refreshing, but like there's some of them are truly seeking, they're authentic in their search. We think they're going in the total wrong direction, but they're not intellectually dishonest, right? You make points about faith and history or whatever, they acknowledge it. You know what I'm saying? But these ones that got famous and made all the books and did all the seminars, they're full of garbage. They know it, because I read that too. He's like, arguing for the Christian, we should not let Christianity go. Why? The very thing you've been trying to trash for the last 10 years. Now you're realizing, oops, and you don't have enough humility to say I was wrong, so go ahead, Ellen.
I mean, I think that a lot of people, if they don't know Christ, like, I think that even like, oh, it's almost like, I don't know, you're getting defensive about your own identity, that you would kind of just get riled about it. And so I've tried to talk to like my kids, like, hey, like if somebody, like one of my sons, it was like kind of upsets him sometimes when people are flaunt their, lack of faith or whatever. And I said, and he's like, well, that's like criticize, like he takes it like it's a criticism of Jesus or something. And I said, what if somebody said to you, yeah, I don't like your mom is bad, this, that, and the other. Like they don't know your mom. So they don't know Christ. So the only way to draw someone to Christ is to model Christ and to be, merciful and to be, especially to people who don't know him, right? Like, so that's the response that it should draw, not one of like anger or whatever. So if someone hasn't been gifted family or the surroundings to show that, or if for whatever reason I understand, like I think sometimes people like feel a lot of shame and then just pull back from everyone. And all of us, I think something happens and you're like, I haven't prayed in a while, or I'm just out of it. Like it's from feelings of shame and feelings of whatever. We're not feeling great. And so I think, we're pulling away, not out of like, we think we're so great usually. Right?
Yeah, I think, I've had these discussions too, and I've had to remind myself, Christ doesn't really need us to defend his honor. He needs us to love people. And if you look at his own example, right, he was certainly pleading and begging and instructing and yelling at the people that, the tax collectors, the sinners, the Pharisees. I mean, he was bringing everybody in to the extent they were ready to receive him. And it wasn't, talk about love. So when we encounter people like that may have a hostility or whatever, we need to not repel them further.
Correct.
Or if someone is insulting or trashing our faith, we in Christ, got to remember, he doesn't just defend them, but he needs us to be the example of him.
Yeah.
And and it's hard, especially, you're given to certain proclivities.
Right. Well, it's almost like a wound. They're in pain. It's like, that's a wound.
Exactly. And then later on in my notes, I have here, like, what is loss of meaning? What can it lead to? Well, let's talk about a couple of things we may have encountered. Have anybody ever seen addiction close up?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Has anybody seen addiction close up? Seen the spiraling downward of addiction?
So you're talking about drugs?
Well, it can be a lot. It could be a lot of. It can be a lot of different things. Yeah, I mean, there's some things that are more benign, like workaholism or whatever. But
Not benign.
well, I shouldn't say benign. Less overtly harmful.
Right.
Less impact. I mean, over time. But like, the standard addictions, the bodily addictions, whatever. If you've ever seen someone spiral downwards, and that sometimes that they hit that rock bottom and it's a point of moving upwards, but sometimes it's just the point of no return, right? You ever seen that? I've seen it in my own life, not me personally. Obviously, I'm sitting here, so I'm alive, but I've seen it with people, and the palpable loss of meaning they have, the nihilism or nihilism, what's the right word, then leads to, in some cases leads to suicide. It's a complete loss of meaning. Hey, Nick, as promised.
So what brings them out of that?
What brings them out of that?
What
Well,
Just about anything.
Well,
Anything could happen.
what brings them out of it is usually like the recovery programs, at least the ones I'm familiar with, and maybe some of you may be more familiar with the ins and outs, but I was invited to attend recovery meetings before, just as an observer to see what goes on. And it's the love of other people. It's hitting that intersection between life has no meaning, I've hit rock bottom, I still have a will to live, and then someone being there at that intersection to begin the process of loving them rightly, to begin to pull them out. And then, of course, they have to accept, right, the whole recovery prayer. It's it's Christian based, but I forget the exact words. But it's that humility. I'm powerless, God. I've hit bottom.
I am an alcoholic.
Yeah, or I am this, or I am that.
Self-naming,
Right.
And then
But this is where the loss of meaning gets people. Some people, not everybody. When they have, and then if they're having that, and to your point, Ellen, I mean, we never know. We won't know maybe even until after we die, when we stand before the judgment seat of Christ. We don't know in those moments how we affect somebody.
I think that everybody has wounds that they
course,
are dealing
yeah.
with. So like, in a way, that thing where you just said about it could be alcoholism, it could be whatever. I think we all have, even if you don't have like a really overt thing, maybe even just being too much people pleaser. In the end, that hurts you,
Yeah.
right? So I guess this is.
Yeah.
You have to be able to feel loved, maybe.
Well, right. You have to be able.
Accept that love.
You have to be receptive, but
To feel worthy of love or something.
But I think, again, it all starts from our deep, deep understanding that everything is derivative, all meaning. Like I tried to talk about the logos last time and how skillful I did, but the whole point in pointing out that when John was saying that statement in his opening gospel, the beginning was the logos, the ancients understood what logos meant. the organizing principle of
Mhm.
reality. So he was saying in the beginning, the reality is Christ. So we don't have to know anything else about except that who the person of Christ is and how he revealed himself to us as through the gospels, the scriptures, and then held in the collective consciousness of the church. So even if we don't think, okay, look, I don't have the mind for theology, I'm not all that. You don't need all that. You just need to know, what the church teaches us about who Christ is, drawing closer to Christ, and let that then mold us to then as we become Christ-like to others. That's really all we need in terms of somebody has a lack of if someone you encounter has, clearly doesn't have any sense of meaning in life, they're aimless, they're listless. We don't have to have all the answers. I think culturally we think sometimes we got to have the intellectual answer. I don't know, maybe not, but I think we need to be. Go ahead.
You just said something that's very interesting. Maybe I missed it earlier today or last week, but being loved doesn't make your life meaningful, right? It's easy to be loved. If I have people around me who love me, that doesn't translate into anything. It's what I do with that love. If I don't reciprocate that love, if I don't make that love an expression of Christ in my relationship with my fellow human beings, it almost seems to me like that's where life has meaning, right? When I'm expressing Christ to others. If I just sit there and absorb it all for my own sort of self-satisfaction, that's not much meaning there.
Well,
right?
no, that's what you're right. Because that's what I was trying to get at last week, talk about the difference between finding your true self and being true to yourself. Remember I said they're ontologically like totally worlds apart, because finding your true self is all about self. Right. So in that scenario, you said you're just absorbing it and you're processing it all through self. But finding your true self is all about participating in the life of Christ. Right. And how do we participate in the life of Christ? We've talked about several things. Well, one way we've talked about is when someone's attacking Christ or attacking you, you don't retaliate. You participate in the life of Christ by trying to love that person and things like that. So what you said is exactly right.
But it goes to the two great commandments, right?
Yeah.
If I love God and I love my neighbor, I've given tremendous meaning to my life right there, right? If I don't love God and I don't love others and I'm loved,
right?
A lot of meaning there,
purpose,
right?
Almost.
Yeah. Well, that is our purpose.
You're the person that you refer to, who is a very pronounced, identified atheist, wants to live among Christians. That's the banquet. Yeah, smart guy.
Well, it
Dead
depends.
in the soul.
No, if he were in this room,
opinions.
if he were in this room, I would chide him a little bit. But I would, in all reality, I would say, listen, Richard, Doctor, nobody want to. I'd really like to have a conversation with you to understand what has led you to this, and something to just try to understand the person, But I may chide a little bit just because it's okay. It's okay to be called out gently. Sometimes we all need to be called out at different times,
But I guess going beyond self-actualization.
Yeah, that's
transcending yourself.
That's an oxymoron.
Why?
Self-actualization.
I guess, right? But
It really is.
A nice pop phrase.
Yeah, I know.
But transcending yourself and manifesting that love that you may have for Christ, whether you know it or not, to others, really gives life tremendous meaning.
Yeah, no, it does, and that's the beauty of the Lord's love. Because think about it, that's really what's required of us, right? And the rest of it,
isn't that part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, though? Self-actualization. Only when you are self-actualized.
Abraham Maslow, psychologist, hierarchy of needs.
Actually be altruistic. Yeah.
Was he Christian?
He's Jewish, I believe.
Yeah.
But the idea is once you are self-actualized, then you can become altruistic. You really can't be altruistic until your base needs are met.
Right.
That's his theory.
That's his theory.
Like you can't love anybody else unless you can't love anybody else unless you love yourself.
But some of the saints lived in extreme poverty and still had it's so
Exactly.
yeah. So it's not dependent on that.
There's a higher power.
Yeah.
But when you talk about you can still be extremely poor and take very good care of other people,
That's
right?
That's what we're saying. Yeah.
It's what I always joke about, what I call the oxygen mask theory. Right?
Yeah.
When you're on a plane, and what do they say to you? Put your
Your
oxygen
own.
mask and make sure you're okay first. If you're not, then you can take care of others, not just physically, but obviously spiritually.
Right.
But you need to be spiritually well grounded to be able to then express Christ to others,
Yeah.
ideally.
It's
Interesting.
Physiological needs, safety, love and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization fulfillment.
See that?
Then that leads to altruism. Was
Yeah.
the idea.
But see, to me, that's a
But
classic example.
That's not what God says.
No, but that's a classic example of the truth breaking through to an
Mhm.
extent, right?
Yeah.
Because God is everywhere present and fills all things. And this isn't my quote. I forget which bishop said it, but if it's true, it's Christian. Not if it's Christian, it's true, right?
Mhm.
Truth is truth, and God's truth breaks through. Now we as human beings like to. We have ego sometimes, and we like to be reductionist and overly simplistic, come up with our own formulas or whatever. But there's good stuff in there, although it's not exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not all. Yeah,
It's a foundation
Yeah,
for
there's-
teachers' college. too.
but I would say too, and we'll wind down on this a little bit. We can explore it a little bit, but then maybe we'll pick it up next week. But we're also talking a lot about getting back to what you said in particular. I would use the word this alignment. This appropriate alignment that we have with Christ, right? Because I wrote in my book a long time ago,
Misalignment.
alignment. Perfectly, yeah. Because I wrote in my book a long time ago. I didn't really realize what I was writing at the time, but I've processed it more. Where I said, I think the happiest person in the world is the person grounded completely in the present moment, whose attention and love is focused completely on others. Because they're not self-aware; they're just doing. And I didn't realize what I wrote at the time, but now I look back, think about the sheep and the goats. Neither one of them knew what they were doing, but one was in complete alignment with being Christ-like, and one group wasn't. But they both were like, "When did I see you?" Right? This gets back to those of you that know your holy fathers in theology. This gets a little into Saint Maximus the Confessor, gnomic will and natural will. Anybody familiar with that? He's like the quantum physicist of the saints. He gets really, but the point being is that what he was saying is pre-sin, that Adam and Eve garden, everything was in perfect alignment. They were created to grow, or they weren't just but the tree was yielding the fruit without effort. They were existing in God's will as children to grow. Everything was in alignment, but then the devil introduced the lie, and through choice, things got out of alignment. So then, what Maximus says, I think, because I'm not saying Maximus, was basically that our gnomic will, this freedom of choice, is damaged, and so now natural will and gnomic will aren't aligned. And so what this gets into then is, I brought this up with Father Thomas Hoppe, was taught on that. Then, and we can get into this next week. Then we really have to examine the freedom of choice versus freedom from choice, and really understand. It gets back to what you said about agency. How is that then exercised in our capacity to find meaning and purpose in life in Christ? And that's really what it gets down to in many respects, because at one point we lived in not here, but at one point culture and faith were aligned. Now, not everybody followed it, but think about, I was brought up before, artists weren't creating art for the sake of self-expression. They were trying to express higher truths, right? But that's because culture and and the belief in God was kind of like this. Now, this current culture we live in here in the United States, Charles Taylor and James K. Smith referred to it as secular 3, where that's just, well, there have been different progressions of secularism, where God is one of many different choices, and it's up to us to choose. Right? He's one of many choices.
Yeah, one of choices.
One of many choices, and then it becomes, then we have maybe a misunderstanding of our freedom of choice, right? Because if God's one of many choices, even that's flawed from our perspective. That's flawed right there. God is the only choice, and then it's within the choice of God what we do. So, anyway.
But it is a choice, and as long as it's not a choice or it's mandated, then it's different too.
Yeah, you can't force people to believe, and Christ never did that.
Mhm.
He
Right.
yeah. Even in the Garden of Eden, right? There's no forcing there. So yeah, we're not forced to. But then you get back to, somebody said it, and maybe it was you. How then do you help someone get back to faith or restore faith or whatever? Well, certainly if we encounter that, we have to be very careful of the choices we're making. And are we? Remember what Christ said to Peter right after Peter confessed him as the Messiah? about 3 or 4 verses later, get behind me, Satan. Because Peter made, like 5 minutes earlier, he made this choice. It was right. 5 minutes later, he made this choice, and he was way wrong. So it's a good, and I'll end there. It's a good reminder to us within our own choices to do our best to be prayerful and cognizant. And I mean, I'll tie this one thing back. That whole natural gnomic will I talked about, the more we participate in the sacramental life of the church, the more those align despite ourselves. Right. So
This banquet.
that's okay. This banquet is about to end because there's other banquets people must go to. So is that a good place to end, or did I create more questions then? Okay. Yeah, okay. So we'll pick that up next week. Thank you. We'll pick that up. We'll pick up next week for those that are able to join. We'll pick up, I want to explore this a little bit more about freedom of choice and go from there. So anyway, God bless everyone. Have a wonderful week. Next week is the 23rd of Sunday, right?
22nd, 23rd. Yeah,
Okay.
before Thanksgiving.
So we'll have one last class before Thanksgiving. Then I think we have a Thanksgiving break, and then we'll pick up in early December.
Okay.
So God bless everyone. See you next week.